quick note before we start. This video is for education and entertainment, and it's built on a genuinely alarming stack of research. Alright, let's dig. Here's a question you've probably never thought to ask. Why do human women live for decades after they can no longer have children? Think about how strange that is. In the cold logic of evolution, the entire game is passing on your genes. An animal that can no longer reproduce is, from natural selection's brutal point of view, done. And yet, human females routinely go through menopause in their 40s or 50s and then live on, healthy and active, for another 30, 40, sometimes 50 years. A third of a human lifetime or more spent unable to have children. Almost no other animal does this. So why do we? What is all that extra life for? Evolution doesn't usually hand out free decades. If those extra decades were doing something so useful that natural selection actively kept them, that's where things get interesting. The answer might be one of the most beautiful ideas in all of human evolution, and it's called the grandmother hypothesis. It argues that grandmothers aren't a happy accident. Grandmothers may be one of the reasons our species became what it is. Let's set up the puzzle first. In most mammals, females can reproduce right up until near the end of their lives. A female chimpanzee can keep having babies into old age. She doesn't get many decades of post-reproductive life. There are only a handful of animals we know of that go through something like true menopause. A few species of whales are famous examples. So evolution somehow decided that keeping women alive and strong for decades after their last child was worth it. That only makes sense if those women were doing something valuable. Enter the grandmother. The hypothesis grew out of watching real foraging peoples, in particular the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer people in Tanzania. Researchers noticed something striking. The grandmothers were not sitting around being cared for. They were among the hardest, most productive workers in the whole group. Older Hadza women spent long hours foraging, especially digging up deep, tough, calorie-rich tubers that were difficult for young children to extract. And crucially, they weren't gathering that food mainly for themselves. They were feeding their grandchildren. And this is where it clicks into an evolutionary argument. Think about what happens when a mother has a new baby. A nursing infant demands enormous time and energy. This forces a long gap between children because the mother can't provision an older weaned child and a new infant at the same time. But now add a grandmother. If grandma is digging tubers and feeding the older just weaned child, then the mother is freed up. She can wean her current child earlier and have her next baby sooner because someone else is helping carry the load. Mothers with helpful grandmothers nearby can raise more children, more closely spaced, and more of those children survive. The grandmother isn't reproducing herself, but she's massively boosting the reproduction and survival of her own descendants who carry her genes. A grandmother can't pass on her genes by having more babies, but she can pass them on by keeping her existing grandchildren alive. Natural selection favoured women who lived long, healthy lives past their childbearing years, because those grandmothers left more surviving descendants. Longevity itself got selected for through grandmothering. The long human lifespan might have been driven by the usefulness of grandmothers, and the hypothesis reaches even further into the structure of human childhood and intelligence. Human children are helpless for an extraordinarily long time compared to other apes. We have long, dependent childhoods and big, energy-hungry brains. That kind of slow, expensive childhood is only affordable if there's enough extra help and food to support it. A mother alone often can't provide all of that, but a mother plus a grandmother can. Grandmothers may have helped underwrite the whole human strategy of raising slow-growing, big-brained, deeply learning children. There's another kind of value a grandmother brings that goes beyond digging tubers: knowledge. A grandmother who has lived 60 or 70 years in a landscape is a living library. She has seen droughts the young adults haven't. She remembers which plants saved the group during the last famine, where a hidden water source is. In a world with no writing, no books, that accumulated experience lives only in the minds of the old. An elder isn't just an extra pair of hands. She's the group's memory, its database, its insurance policy against rare disasters. And this points to how menopause itself might have evolved, through reproductive conflict between generations. If both keep having babies at the same time, they're competing for food, care, and help. The younger woman is more related to her own newborn, so it can pay the older woman to stop competing and instead invest in helping her descendants. Menopause isn't a failure. It's an adaptive strategy, a graceful handoff where the older generation stops reproducing and pivots to supporting the younger one. Stopping in the right circumstances can outcompete continuing. That's a beautiful and counterintuitive idea. Humans are what's called cooperative breeders. Human mothers have always raised children with help, from grandmothers, fathers, aunts, older siblings, the whole band. It genuinely takes a village, and that's not a greeting card sentiment. It's a description of how our species reproduces. The grandmother is a central pillar of that cooperative system. Remove her, and the human way of raising children starts to wobble. Now, let me be honest about the debate. This is a hypothesis, not a settled fact, and there are smart people who push back. Some argue the math doesn't fully add up. The reproductive boost might not be large enough alone to explain menopause. Others offer alternative explanations. The mother hypothesis, focusing on staying alive to finish raising your own last children. The likely truth is several factors braided together. But the grandmother hypothesis remains one of the most compelling threads. And the observations behind it, those tireless Hadza grandmothers, are real and powerful. And we can actually test a piece of this, which is more than you can say for a lot of deep past ideas. Researchers have gone into detailed historical records, church registers of births and deaths in Finland and Canada, tracking families across generations. When they looked at whether having a living grandmother nearby affected how many grandchildren survived, they found that it did. Children with a living local maternal grandmother tended to survive better, and their mothers had more children. The grandmother effect is not just plausible. In many places, it's measurable. Remember those whales? Some toothed whales, like orcas, also go through menopause and live long post-reproductive lives. Older post-reproductive female orcas act as leaders and knowledge keepers, guiding their pods to food, especially in hard times. Grandmother orcas remember where the salmon are during lean years, and their presence improves the survival of their families. When evolution stumbles onto the same solution twice, in creatures as different as humans and killer whales, that's a strong sign the solution is real. Long-lived grandmothers are a good idea whether you're an ape or a whale. And I think this reframes something we often get wrong. We tend to treat aging in women as a kind of fading, a decline into irrelevance. The deep past says the exact opposite. Older women weren't peripheral. They may have been load-bearing pillars of human survival, the expert foragers, the extra providers, the keepers of decades of hard-won knowledge about the land. The very existence of the modern human lifespan may be in part a monument to how essential they were. Grandmothers didn't just come along for the ride of human evolution, they helped drive it. So the next time you see an older woman and some part of your culture whispers that her most important years are behind her, remember the grandmother hypothesis. Remember the Hadza women digging tubers to feed their grandchildren, and the orca matriarchs leading their pods to the salmon. It's entirely possible that grandmothers are one of the reasons you have a long life to live at all, and one of the reasons our species grew the big, slow, brilliant brains that let you understand this sentence. That's not a small thing. That might be one of the biggest things. The next time your culture tries to tell you that a woman's value fades with age, remember that the deep past says precisely the opposite, and it says it with data. All the sources are in the description: the Hadza studies, Kristen Hawkes' work, the killer whale research, and the critiques. Go read them. because the debate itself is fascinating. And remember, the grandmothers of the deep past are, very literally, your family, and you may owe them more than anyone ever told you. So stay curious, honour the knowledge keepers, and keep digging. See you in the next one. Bye! Why do human women live for decades after they can no longer have children? Almost no other animal does this. If a third of a female's life is spent unable to reproduce, and that pattern stuck around, then those extra decades must be doing something useful. The result? Mothers with helpful grandmothers nearby can raise more children, more closely spaced, and more of those children survive. Longevity itself got selected for. It's a stunning idea that the long human lifespan might have been driven by grandmothering. A mother plus a grandmother, plus other helpers, can afford the long, expensive childhood that big brains require. She remembers which plants saved the group the last time a famine came, where a hidden water source is that only reveals itself in the worst years. Menopause isn't a failure or a breakdown. It's an adaptive strategy, a graceful handoff. It genuinely takes a village, and the grandmother is a central pillar of that cooperative system. Children with a living local maternal grandmother tended to survive better. The fingerprint of the helpful grandmother is visible in the demographic data. When evolution stumbles onto the same solution twice, in humans and killer whales, that's a strong sign the solution is real. In the environment that shaped our species, older women may have been load-bearing pillars of survival. The expert foragers, the extra providers, the keepers of knowledge about the land, the seasons, the lean times. Grandmothers helped drive human evolution. They helped underwrite our big brains and long childhoods. We tend to treat aging in women as decline. The deep past says the opposite. The grandmother hypothesis says those decades were the most valuable contribution to our species' success. Grandmother orcas remember where the salmon are during lean years. Their presence improves the survival of their families. The observations behind the hypothesis, tireless Hadza grandmothers feeding their grandchildren, are real and powerful. You may owe grandmothers more than anyone ever told you. Honour the knowledge keepers. Keep digging. See you in the next one. Bye.